St. Maximilian Kolbe designated a spiritual battle against Freemasonry as one of the principal objectives of becoming a member of the Militia Immaculata, the Army of the Immaculate. What was so wrong with Freemasonry then, and what continues to be so wrong with Freemasonry now, that the Catholic Church would continue to issue statements of saying to be a Freemason is absolutely incompatible with being a Catholic? Hello and welcome to Mcast. This is Dr. Mark Miravalle, Professor of Theology and Mariology at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. And we're going to answer that question in our segment today. What is so wrong about Freemasonry? But I want to start by reading a statement by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. This was a statement authored by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger in 1983 and approved directly by John Paul II. And this document tells us from authority, with the clarity of the Church and the ordinary magisterium, that you cannot be Catholic and a Freemason. Let me read this document. This was released by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. This is, of course, the Doctrinal Commission of the Church, November 26, 1983. You can also Google this and get this on the internet. I read, the document is entitled Declaration on Masonic Associations. Quote, "It has been asked whether the position of the Church in regard to Freemasonry has been changed by reason of the fact that there is no express mention of the same in the new Code of Canon Law as there was in the previous 1917 Code. This congregation is able to reply that the circumstance indicated is due to an editorial policy which has been followed in regards to other associations as well, which have likewise not been mentioned inasmuch as they are included in broader categories." What that means is that in the 1970 Code there was a direct reference of the direct evil of Freemasonry. It's not in this code because it's contained in a larger category. The congregation further clarifies, "For this reason, therefore, the negative position of the Church in regard to Masonic associations remains unchanged. Since their basic principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the teachings of the Church, and consequently, membership in them remains forbidden. The faithful who belong to Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion." I'm going to repeat that again. The congregation tells us, quote, "The faithful who belong to Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion." So this is telling us with the clarity of the Church that to be a Freemason is objectively to be in a state of grave sin. That means out of sanctifying grace. That means without a change, that runs the possibility of eternal damnation. That's how serious it is to be a Freemason. The congregation continues, "It is not within the competence of local diocesan church authorities to pass judgment on the nature of Masonic associations in such a way as to derogate from what has been established above." That's referring to the fact that unfortunately certain bishops would say, well, in our diocese, the Freemasons are okay. They're doing good works and they're helping. And this is the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith saying no local bishop can approve what the ordinary magisterium considers absolutely irreconcilable. The document goes on to state, "The Supreme Pontiff John Paul II, in the course of his audience granted to the undersigned Cardinal Prefect, approved the present declaration, which was decided upon in the ordinary meeting of this congregation and has ordered its publication. Rome, from the office of the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, November 26, 1983, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, Prefect," who of course is now Pope Benedict XVI. So that makes it clear from the authority of the Church that if you're a Freemason, you are in an objective state of grave sin. You cannot receive the sacrament. You cannot be a member. And no local authority can derogate from this norm from the Vatican. And the question is, why? Why is Freemasonry so intrinsically incompatible? My friends, in our segments here, we're not going to have time to go through all of the reasons. I'm just going to give you the pillar reasons because the list is endless. Let me mention briefly that Freemasonry starts in an organized fashion in 1717 in London, but extends to Scottish Freemasonry and French and German Freemasonry very quickly, and then Masonry is throughout the world. Almost immediately as soon as Freemasonry organizes as a set association, the pontiffs came out and condemned Masonry time and time and time again. Leo XIII has a major encyclical against Freemasonry, but long before that, some 6 Holy Fathers, before the middle of the 19th century, condemned the intrinsic evil of Freemasonry. Why? Number one, because a premise of Masonry is that hidden knowledge is power. It is a form of Gnosticism. It is a secret society that believes that through secrets and through secret knowledge, greater power can be ascribed and therefore a greater position of the human person. One author properly said that Freemasonry really begins in the Garden of Eden, because as soon as man seeks a higher knowledge and can only get it through disobedience to God and the divine law, and eventually what becomes the teachings of the church, then you have the heart of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a rationalism and a Gnosticism. It is a mind over a heart. It is an act of arrogance and rational disobedience to the church, which ultimately seeks to put Satan in the place of Jesus Christ. And Satan knows, and the echelons of Masonry knows, that it can only happen through the bringing down of the vicar of Christ and the church. And indeed, in the higher levels of Freemasonry vows, one of the gestures that has to be done is to take a papal crown, throw it on the ground, and crush it underfoot several times. The animosity against the Holy Father is very clear. So number one, hidden knowledge is power. Number two, all human authority is evil, and therefore Masonry seeks to dislodge all forms of human authority. Now, of course, this is an act of great irony, and some would even say hypocrisy, in the sense that Masonry has a very highly structured authority system, from the first level all the way up to the 32nd level, which is technically the height, and then a 33rd level is the honorary level of Masonry. But the idea was a type of Enlightenment idea that any authority, any human authority, was evil, and they rightly recognize the Catholic Church as the greatest human authority because it's an authority that goes beyond this world. So from the beginning, the focus of Freemasonry was against the Roman Pontiff, against the Holy Father, and against all the other elements of the Church. Masonry also has as one of its major premises the idolatry of reason. Some will say, well, you can be a Catholic, you can be a Protestant, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Hindu, you can be Jewish, and you can be Masonry. Not if you want to be true to any of those other religions. But from the Catholic perspective, we have to be true to the one true religion in its fullness, and that's the Catholic Church, as we know from the Church and we know from Lumen Gentium. Now, as soon as you become a Mason on the first level of Masonry, you must take an oath which violates your integrity to the Catholic Church. You must take an oath which places your local group of Masons, that is the lodge, over any other authority. So while a Masonic organization will say, of course, we accept Catholics, we accept Protestants, we accept everyone else, but you fundamentally and metaphysically and intrinsically undermine being Catholic in the first vow that you take. So it's a contradiction. And ultimately, Masonry seeks again to fight the moral teachings of the Church by compromise, and it uses the mass media to do that. We're going to get into a little bit more depth on Masonry because, again, St. Maximilian said to be in the army of the Immaculate, one of your primary objectives has to be against Freemasonry, both in truth and in prayer and in spiritual offering. So we're going to have a little bit more on Masonry and then the remedy of St. Maximilian. This is Mark Miravalle with Mcast saying, let's follow the wisdom of St. Maximilian. Let's pray against the evils of Freemasonry, and let's take on our task, not in crying or complaining, but in using the Immaculata to crush the head of Satan, which exists in Freemasonry. God bless.